presentation. Can you see the PowerPoint presentation? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. All right. So just a real quick overview. I'm going to talk about, this little slide deck. We're going to talk about that. Then we're going to go into the application itself, into dEPM, talk and show you the main home page that we have, some navigation, workflow sort of things. Then we'll talk about, just to show you how you can do some of the functionality within the system and some of the things you can do that can be helpful to you. First off would be interest rate management. I'm going to show you how you can load them, and then how you can use the function, not just functionality, but the way the dimensionality works. And we'll talk a little bit about the technical foundation on which this is built and how this is really flexible and can really help you in your planning activities. So we're going to look at that, and then some G&A expense planning to show you how this works on the expense side. Then some capital planning. I think you guys were interested in seeing capital planning, decision packages / strategy management, and allocation. So it's going to be a very quick and very full 40 minutes, but I'll work to make sure I do it in a very understandable way that helps you out, okay? And let's look at it for planning overview. When I talk about Cloud Suite Financials and what people call dEPM, or Dynamic Enterprise Performance Management, one of the things I want you to start thinking of is that this is one comprehensive financial solution, okay? And it's an end-to-end solution where you have things on what would be called the ERP or general ledger side, and then the planning side, which is dEPM. Within this solution, you have the ability, and I'll show you a slide in just a couple of minutes, where you can actually set up a connection in Cloud Suite Financials between dEPM, and also set up like mappings, so that then you could pull things from the different dimensions that exist within Cloud Suite Financials. Your versions, your entities, but especially your chart of accounts, the kind of accounts you'd want to use within your planning. If they exist within Cloud Suite Financials, you can map and pull them over, so that then within that mapping, as time goes on and you have obviously everybody's dimensionality, everybody's dimensions in the elements or the different items within them, they change over time. Everybody's situation is dynamic. So if you update specific, if you add a new account or something along those lines, it gets pulled in. So what I want you to think about this is one comprehensive end-to-end financial solution. There's not a couple of standalone applications. It is one comprehensive solution, okay? So you can see on this particular slide how we have Cloud Suite, and then we have budgeting, planning, and also financial consolidations within the Dynamic Enterprise Performance Management platform. And you'll notice that the dimensions on each side, it's based on the same technology platform, okay? The multi-dimensional, what we call online analytical processing, or OLAP model. So what you have is that you can slice and dice the information. It's based on different dimensions. There are cubes, and those cubes have different dimensions. And within those dimensions, as you go along and as you change them, let's say you're changing your budget or you're changing some kind of plan, what will happen is that data is available real time to you. So in other words, if you make a change to a part of your budget based on some kind of input from like a manager, what will happen is that as you make those changes, once they're in the system, which will be instantaneously, whatever reports or dashboards are based upon those, on the data will now be refreshed and will show the data that is most current and also real time. So the idea is that using different versioning as well, if you want to save off, let's say you have 3 different versions of the budget that you've worked on, by using those different versions, you don't have to save off a piece of the data. What happens is that data is automatically available because you can transfer over the data from a version 1 budget to a version 2 budget, and then use that as your foundation to work another version of the budget. And as you go along and you have different iterations of your budget, the information is readily available to you to be able to use in variance reporting, etc., to be able to see what the changes are as you've gone through. Does that make sense to everyone?
Okay. Yes.
Okay, so what I want to show you is this screen here. Is remember how I mentioned earlier how we saw how it's like we have one comprehensive financial solution, okay? What you have here is where the screen on the left is from Cloud Suite Financials, and it's an administrator screen where you actually have an options screen, and you'll see at the very bottom, you check that box and it says use dEPM budgeting. That connects the two. As you go over to the left or to the right hand side, you'll see a dimensional map. What you're able to do there is take the different dimensions that you want to use to be able to create dimensions within Dynamic Enterprise Performance Management or on the budgeting planning side. So what will happen with that is that as you go forward and changes are made to those dimensions, and based on how often you want to update the dimensions in the data, that data will now flow through into dEPM so it's available to you for use. As you know, like if they're actual type data coming from Cloud Suite Financials, then that data, you know, you may want to use that both in your reporting but also as a foundation for your planning, for your plans as well. Okay? Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes.
Okay, so now I'm going to stop showing you PowerPoints and we're going to start taking a look at the software. So let me get out of here and now let me go to Google Chrome. Okay? And by the way, I did mention that it was from New York, and if I talk too fast, please let me know, okay? Because I'm really good at talking fast. So let's go to D. If you'll notice that the planning side of things uses the same front end to get into the application. We mentioned it early, Annie, when she was doing her presentation early, and mentioned it as Mingle. I'm not going to go through Mingle, but you'll notice that we have, let's say, our financial analyst in the FP&A who's doing planning, Kelly Cole. This is her front end. This is her feed. And you'll see that she has different groups that you can create, in this case, like an FP&A group, branch banking group, treasury group, etc. So she's able to collaborate and communicate, pass files back and forth, and maybe, you know, different things within these groups. They're able to communicate as a group rather than with everybody that she knows, that sort of thing. So from this point, we have something called home pages. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go into the banking home page. And this is our front end. And on the front end that we put together, this is really what you can do with this application. It's very unlimited. It's so flexible. There's a lot you can do with it. You'll notice this is our front end for banking. And across the top, you will see 5 panels. And those 5 panels are for different metrics. Now, within the metrics, you can have a different set of metrics depending on who you are, okay? Depending on the role you know, that you perform within the organization. So all of our security is set up as role-based security as it is on Cloud Suite Financials. And in fact, again, being a comprehensive solution, that is all managed over on that side, okay? So what we have there is you can have different metrics that are applicable to the specific person involved. Also, if I click this Infor logo, what will happen is you'll notice a filter box jumps up. And what that is, that gives you an ability to be able to choose, again, slicing and dicing, looking at specific pieces of the data. So if I take a look here, suppose I don't want to see CDB total, but rather I just want to see Caribbean Development Bank. And I click this, you'll notice that all changes because now we're looking at a different slice of the data. Also, too, if I go back and open up that box, you'll notice versions, okay? You have unlimited number of versions. So you'll see here you have budgets, you have forecasts, you can have rolling forecasts. The key here is that you can have as many as you want. You don't have to name them budget 1, budget 2, etc. You can name them anything that's valid and relevant and helps you understand what kind of data exists in that particular version. And having all these different versions, as I mentioned earlier when we were doing our overview, is that by using these different versions, you can now have different sets of data that you can take a look at, different slices of data that you can take a look at and use in your reporting. And it's very powerful because you have actuals, you have budgets, and by having all that available to you now, and again, it's real time, you have a lot of flexibility in being able to do a lot of what-if or scenario type analysis of your data, and also entry of your data that way as well. So let's first take a look at workflow management. You'll notice on this particular this particular dashboard, and this is a dashboard. You'll see all the different underneath tasks. All right, if we go to Premier National Bank or we go to Premier National US, if we click on that, you'll notice that the wheel on top, that changes and it shows us the different statuses of the different workbooks that our planners are working on. And it also shows you this up at top as well. So if I open this up, again, we're drilling down. So let's say I go to a specific office. You'll see that we have different dashboards that are in progress, that are submitted, and that have been approved, or the ones with the red X means they've been submitted but were rejected. On here, you can see each workbook. You can see the person who is responsible for it and the approver. And what the key takeaway from this particular dashboard, that this particular piece of workflow management, is that this, again, as you go along and the planners are doing what they're executing their plan, they're using their workbooks, they're working on the workbooks, they're entering data. What you'll be able to see is in real time, if you're a manager that has responsibility for managing this, or you're a user that you're a planner, you can see what the status of your workbooks are. Your manager and any kind of management above that can see what the status of the different workbooks are. And what this really does is help them focus their attention on who they need to talk to, because you have due dates in there and you have your statuses. So if you've got workbooks that are late, this now helps management focus on who they need to talk to and be able to try to drill down and understand what the problems are that are preventing people from getting their work done. Do they have the right information? Are they procrastinating? Most of the times it's not procrastination, but rather it's a lack of resources, a lack of information. They can't get the data they need from someone. So this helps you drill down on being able to take a look at where you need to focus your attention and what kind of actions you may need to take to be able to resolve the issue. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions at this point? Again, I'm doing this kind of fast, but if you have any questions as we go along, feel free. Okay? All right. So what we're going to do is take a look at managing interest rates. I know that since you're a bank and you do loans, that one of the key things is that you have to be sensitive to what your interest rates look like. So you may be getting, you may talk to an econometrics firm that gives you information, that sort of thing. So what this allows you to do is be able to profile and manage interest rates that you would then use in your planning. So like if I was to say, okay, I have different versions of this. Let me open this up. If I take a look, I have budget, I have actuals, what actually occurred in the past, but budgets 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we can model the interest rates. Let's say if I look at budget 4, we could have different scenarios that say we're looking at interest rates that are relatively stable, interest rates that are moderately volatile or very volatile based on potential economic conditions that exist. So if you work with an econometrics firm or you work with a Bloomberg or somebody like that to be able to get information, what you can do is, I'm going to zero these out just to show you. You can get information from them. You can either hook up directly into whatever feed they have, or if you wind up having someone who gets that information and creates like CVS files or something, like CSV files, excuse me, that have this information in it, you can then have them and easily upload them with a process that would then pull all this information into the interest rate model that we have here. So we're finished processing, and I click and load complete OK, and you'll now notice that that this information loads up. Okay. So now you can potentially have 4 different models. In this case, we have 4 different models of interest rates. Also, what happens here is that you have within here the ability to see instantly what the impact of those rates are. So if you now have changes in the rates, or you're looking at the differences between versions, what will happen is it'll pull in the balances. In this case, this is depository information. But you'll have all of these numbers here under balances, like checking, savings, etc. Those all come from the system. It's either budget, in this case it's budget 4, what we anticipate will be the level of those accounts, the balances of those accounts at any specific point in time, you know, in this case monthly. And then what that does is applies these rates to the balances and then gives you in real time what the cost, or if in case if this was a loan portfolio instead of depository information, that then what will happen is it'll show you what the impact of those rate changes are. And if you have, again, if you have a bunch of, if you have four different, in this case, four different versions of this, it shows you what the impact is for each one of those interest rate models, again, whether it's very, you know, highly volatile, whether it's, you know, stable, etc. Okay? Does that make sense? Again, this is very powerful because this is available to you real time. And again, you can slice and dice the data. You know, like right now we're looking at total interest-bearing liabilities, but we could also look at mortgages, and we can also, in this case, it's a line of business. We have retail banking, but we could have other lines of businesses such as, you know, like the mortgage people, etc. So that's more for a commercial type bank, I understand, but you know, you probably have very, very similar sorts of needs, and this is really flexible and really powerful. Okay.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah.
You're here. Yeah.
There's a question here, and just to reiterate, remember this is a development bank, so there's no such things as mortgage. It's, you know, it's not a retail bank. Right?
No, it's, yeah, no, I understand. No, it's loans that they development type loans they give out, and so I understand the different business context. So that's why I'm talking about this in those terms. You know, we can extrapolate what that, you know, what this particular model shows to what they might, you know, to what they would need. You would be able to, it's very flexible. You'd be able to model it for the loan types that you have yourself and within that bank.
Go back to that. Can we go back to that? I would like to have a look at it.
Sure.
Because we actually have a modeling solution that's quite old, and we were looking for a replacement, and this looks very interesting.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. This is awesome. To me, I mean, because I used to work for a large international bank, and I built their system, and this kind of stuff is something that absolutely helped out the people in our organization, because they were able to look at these kinds of things, you know. And
does this allow you to be able to estimate disbursements and see what impact that would have on your cash flows and things of that nature? Yes, you can do that as well. Yeah, in fact, I can show you a cash flow report we have. One of the things I talk about is how this is an end-to-end solution, how it's a comprehensive solution. So we'll talk about that, and I'll show you some of the cash flow modeling that I have done that we have done in the system. Okay. So this could also produce all of the financial statements that we would project over the periods that we're interested in projecting?
Yes. I'm planning, I'm planning and budgeting and the actuals as well, and we actually have another financial consolidation model. I don't know how complex your organization is, but we actually have, which I'm not showing today, but we have a financial consolidation model that can do all the kind of statutory financial consolidations you need to do as well.
Yes, there's no consolidations here, just the one entity. Just
right.
Aware.
Okay, so you don't have to worry about that sort of thing here. That's why I'm not, you know, involved. That's why we're not discussing it today.
Yes. So we're on time, but there's a real interest in pursuing this at a later point. If we could get some of your time when they're available, you're available. I'd like to learn.
Certainly. No, I'd be thrilled to get together with you guys again. Okay.
We'll turn it back to you.
All right. Oh, great. Thank you. So one of the things that I wanted to, I guess it's somewhat similar, but one of the things I wanted to show you was interest income, and it's called, the model is called mortgage interest income. But again, you can see here that one of the things is you can drill down on the type of mortgages. And again, notice that all the information that we have, like if I were to go back to the model we had, we were in budget 4, but this is budget 1. You can see that again, all of the information we have as far as like, you know, the different rates, etc., all flows automatically in. As soon as you update it, it will come into this model and do those calculations. So if you were doing any kind of calculation at all, whether it's on the expense or the income side, that you're able to take that information, model it in one place, and then it all flows through. And that's what really the the upshot of this particular piece of it is that it allows you to manage something like rates in one place. You'll see the flow through to this other model that then actually does a more granular drill down onto specific types of loans. Okay. Any questions? So another
follow-up sessions. That's the bottom line. Want to bring in some more people from another area.
All right. Okay. So let's take a look at some expense planning. And as we load that up, you'll see that we have a front end here for dEPM that actually displays the specific workbooks. Remember when we did the workflow dashboard? The names of these specific workbooks were in that particular dashboard, and these are the dashboards that Kelly Cole is responsible for. These are assigned directly to her. And if you'll take a look at the task bar that I'm pointing to at this on the upper left-hand side, we have something called a planning cycle. A planning cycle helps you manage specific planning events. So in this case, we have banking. We have a 5-year plan. You could have different. Each specific cycle has a specific complement. You can limit the number of versions or entities that are available to people. So the whole thing is that the cycle helps control each planning event that you have. So if you have a 5-year plan, you may want a different mix of entities and versions than you might have for just a plan that you're doing specifically for 1 year for one entity for a specific set of expenses that you wanted to model and be able to take a look at and get some kind of context as to what what the expenses for a very limited set of accounts might be. So that's, the planning cycle helps you do that. Within here also, you can select what versions. In other words, this will allow you to be able to filter out the workbooks that appear on the screen for you, as well as entities. And then you have the workbook, so we're going to click on the workbook link. And as this opens up, one thing you'll see when we open up the workbook is we have a left-hand panel, and this will just take a moment to open up. And this is because of my Apple. Let's see if I can get this to render better. Let me open this. Let me close this and then reopen this up. Okay. All right. Anyways, let me see if I can scroll over. Go down all the way. And let me try to open this all the way there. Okay. So anyways, at this point, what we have here on the left-hand panel is this shows us the workflow status. Right here is a submit button. And if you click that submit button, that will then take this, after you do all your planning and all your work, if you take the submit button, it will then send this on to the person who is the approver, okay? So in this case, Kelly's boss is Denise Williams. Denise Williams will now, remember that panel we had on the front end? Denise Williams will now have that on her front end, and Kelly will no longer see it until she either approves it or rejects it. If she rejects it, it goes back to Kelly, and she's able to put any number of appropriate comments on there to help Kelly fix the workbook and the information within it. All right, so let us go to professional fees planning. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get actuals for 2016, and I'm going to get the budget for 2017. And you'll notice, again, we're slicing and dicing, so we're seeing a specific pieces of the data for our work, okay? Within this panel, these are called analysis dimensions, so the actuals, and then you'll notice a column with a percentage. What that percentage column does is that allows us to be able to see what the difference is between 2016's actuals, which is basically the foundation for our budget, and 2017 budget. And you'll see that there's a 4% increase, and notice how that is that in red and has a negative sign in front of it. That is because when we set this system up, we tell it, and you can do this for each planning cycle, by the way, we tell the system that if 2017 budget is higher than the previous year's actual, that is considered a negative condition, okay? So in other words, we want everyone to budget less than 2016. So if we have a greater amount for 2017, then what you'll see is everything, all the analysis columns, the two analysis columns, which are first the actual numeric percentage difference, and then also a horizontal bar that will show, give us some kind of graphical representation of, what the difference is. And again, if it's green, it's less than the previous year's actuals. If it's red, it's more, okay? And also now you'll see a trend line. These are called spark lines. There's two types of spark lines. One is a highly technical term here, a squiggly line. And this is, in other words, a vertical column chart. So what that shows is the seasonal pattern that exists within the data as it's been input in the budget. And what that does is between those three analysis columns, that lets anyone reviewing this, or the planner who's working on it, or anybody reviewing this particular worksheet, it will allow them to be able to understand, what they need to look at. If this is, planned for more than the previous year's actuals, does that make sense? Is that okay for this account? The reasons why it could be okay, and that helps the planner and the approver both focus immediately on what they need to focus on, both in raw numbers and also in the seasonality pattern. Does this make sense based on what I know about this expense account? Okay. Also, we have some other functionality that allows us to be able to move data quickly. If I click on this, we get something called a splasher. And what I can do is either overwrite the value, increase or decrease the value by a specific amount, or increase it by a percentage value. And then what you do is you splash it, what it sounds like, you splash it down. And then what that'll do is that will change this number for the year and then wind up raking it, or what we call phasing it, across the entire, whatever the time scale is for that particular year. You can also do this on a monthly basis too, okay? Then we have something called phasing. And phasing is how you set your seasonality patterns. So if I go in here, first off, I can either use an account. So if there is an account I want to spread this across 12 months and the pattern is very similar to the account I'm planning, I can use that account to phase my data. And if I go to define method, you'll notice that we got a couple out of the box, equal and end of quarter, but you can create any sort of phasing method you want. It's unlimited. The only stricture is how many you believe you need and how many you can manage at one time. So if you create a phasing method, you just give it a name, you click this box, you give it a name, and then you put in a pattern that is relevant. And also, notice what's happened here. On the top, the graphical representation, Kelly would then see if she decides to pick seasonal pattern 1. You see what the original value was, but then you'll see what the redistributed value looks like on the, if you choose that specific seasonality pattern. So then you can take a look at it and decide whether or not it makes sense to use it. Okay? Does that make sense? Any questions so far? I got just a couple of more things to show on this, and then we'll move on to other stuff. Okay? Any questions?
No questions right now.
Okay, so if I want more detail, so I can go to consulting fees, and I get something called line details. Okay? So if I look at the line details, what I can do is notice, all right? I can go in and you'll look at consulting fees. I can break this down into more items. Like I can give some detail of business consulting fees, financial consulting fees, etc. So what we have here is that this data would then, you break that down and then it would flow back to our data entry tab. Okay? So that allows you to be able to create more granularity. The other thing too is that people like to annotate things. So if we go in and we take a look here, you see this little notepad. This will give us assumptions for the plan, okay? So, you can put any kind of information in there. You can also add attachments, anything that would help your planner and reviewers be able to take a look at at the data and be able to first off plan it well and then review it well. This helps give people a context of what they might have, and also you can comment. You can create a comment, right? That helps people helps to give anybody who might wind up working this workbook later on. You can do it on a cell-by-cell basis. One thing that we do is the Infor planning solution does have full textual capabilities. We can handle both text and also numerical data. Okay. And if you want to, let's say if I go back and I want to use 2016 actual, let's say I'm starting off. See this little caret here? You can load actual data into the system. Let's say I was starting 2019's plan and I wanted to use 2018 actuals. What I could do is just click that caret either overall, or I could also do it for each individual account where this takes the previous year, whatever's in that extra column. It could take that and move it on. Okay, so it moves it over to 2017. The other thing is when you're all done with all of this, you also have dashboard capabilities. So if I look at 2000 actuals, if I look at the different numbers and I think it's 2016, and I look at 2017, notice how I'm slicing and dicing the data and everything's refreshing, including the graphics on this. So you have very, very powerful capabilities to be able to dashboard this stuff and really analyze your data. A lot of analytics developed in the system, and that you can develop yourself. It's very flexible. Okay. Any questions at this point?
No questions.
Okay, good. Let me go back to our front end. All right, so let me, I just wanted to show you real quick, there was some conversation that you guys wanted to see how a couple of the specialized capabilities work. First off, capital planning. So let me open up our capital planning. We have a workbook for capital planning. And within that capital planning workbook, you will see, and let me go to 2018. All right. So within that, you'll notice, again, we have the same kind of workbook. So you're doing your planning, and again, you'll see that we have different asset accounts. This is the account level. So we have property, plant, and equipment, and you'll see the accumulated depreciation that exists with that account. If I click on this particular account, you'll see something open up called custom details, and that's where you actually do the planning. This number, you can change the numbers here if you want, but actually within custom details, this allows you to be able to do planning for the specific types of what we call asset categories underneath these specific asset accounts. And what that is furniture, fixtures, and small equipment and IT hardware. These are some of the elements that there are some of the asset categories that exist for underneath that specific account, property, plant, and equipment. Okay, and what you can do here is then you can input the numbers. You can first of all designate how many months you want to plan for, but also you can put in, what you do is you configure by asset category what the unit cost is per unit for that type of furniture, fixture, small equipment, IT hardware, and you can have others. These are just demo examples. But once you put in the unit numbers, that then multiplies it across, and then that data flows into the data entry screen. Okay, and so that's how you develop the numbers that exist for within the account. Okay, so they feed into the, based on, you do your category asset planning, you configure everything, you configure your categories, you configure the categories and match them to the accounts. You match the accounts, the categories, and also the depreciation. You configure the depreciation based on, whether it's straight line, etc., whatever depreciation methods you use. And so you actually can go in and configure all of that, and then it flows through to this workbook, and then you do your planning there. We also have something called an account details tab, and again, this is out of the box stuff, okay? You'll see here that what you have, and it'll show what your opening balance is and what your calculation inputs are, and then what you've put in there, and this gives you a graphical representation of the movement within the asset accounts. So, movements in the asset accounts are important, and for capital accounts, this then shows you how that, how that things have flown. Okay. So does that make sense, you guys?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I know this is quick, so there's a lot more detail to it, but we'll work through this. All right. So let me go to what we call decision packages. Okay. So since you're involved in economic development loans, I put this in here called economic development expenses. This is something called a decision package. Okay. So decision packages work on something called strategy management, and you'll see when we look at this decision package, we see that strategy, when we develop strategy, I know that you wanted to see strategy management. The way we do strategy management here is we have goals and strategies and tactics, and these are set up. There's another whole screen that does this, but they're used in these decision packages, so this is a good way to explain them. Goals are, you set up, we want to do economic development projects. The strategy is transportation infrastructure improvements, right? So that's our strategy, improving infrastructures. And then a tactic is improving airport facilities and access. So if I click on this particular item, you'll see that that has that information in there. Now, when we first pull this up, you are able to go through and, when you create this decision package and choose these underneath airport facilities and access, there is also another one. There's also another one which has to do with improving harbors, because I know in the Caribbean there's a lot of cruise traffic, and the harbors are essential to that. So what you can also set up something called analysis dimensions, and within that analysis dimension, I have set up the economic development projects that we're currently working. So underneath this tactic of improving airport facilities and access, we now have this particular project that we've chosen underneath that, which is the airport improvements in Grand Cayman. Okay, so if we go from here, we're now going to go to data entry, and so this is just an expense. This is the expenses that are involved with the specific, with the specific decision package. And what this is we're modeling general, expenses, G&A type expenses, that, like project managers, etc., stuff like that, that would be on the project. So again, we have modeled out, I think it is like an 8-month period where we have different types of costs that are involved within the management of this particular, the Grand Cayman Airport improvements. So right now what we'd be is maybe in the assessment phase, looking at the airport and deciding how, what kind of improvements may need, what are advisable. The key thing here is that you're able to, again, remember the line items, right, that we had before? We can go to line details and map out the consulting, the types of consultants we're using, and all that kind of stuff. Again, notice we are using the same kind of functionality over and over, but in different ways, many different ways. So at this point, we take the tactic, we take the strategy, we take the goal, the strategy, and the tactic. We then apply it to a specific project, and then we go through and we model the types of expenses, being able to do it with the line details and being able to go to more granular levels. All right, does that make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Okay, all right, good. All right, and last but not least, and I promise it'll only take me another 5 minutes because I know there are some other people that have to do things. Allocations. Okay, and I have to switch over to another person, because at this point the person that we're working as, his name is Johnny Cook, and he does not do. He is not an administrator. So, anyways, this is allocation. So let me go back to my screen. All right. So
Yeah, I mean, is this, I knew that it was mentioned to me that you guys wanted to see allocations, so I just want to make sure this is relevant to what you're doing or are interested in doing. So, yeah, allocation, you configure it this way.
Look and see if there's anything interesting.
All right. All right. All right, so anyways, we have like, within here, you know how allocations, we do them like on levels and then steps, okay? So it's kind of that waterfall thing. You have allocation level 1, you have several steps underneath allocation level 1. That sets up the data for your next level of allocations, allocation 2, with its steps, okay? And the steps should be in a sequence that, you know, that need to be done to make sure that the data is going from one entity or one account or one organization, etc., that it, you know, it's there when the next allocation comes. So we do that on that whole waterfall idea, you know, levels, steps, level 2 step, level 3 steps, etc., until you get, we have 10 levels available out of the box. If I go to parameterization overview, you'll notice that we have travel expense, this particular travel expenses to G&A, travel expenses G&A to marketing. That then what happens is that we have it set up so that then we're discharging it proportionally, etc., and we can edit each line. Notice one line for budget 1, one line for budget 2. So your different versions, you can have it, you know, the allocation set up differently, so then you can kind of review it and see what the difference is and see if the allocation makes sense to you, okay? So what happens is you have a source, and you're also able to do driver-based allocations as well. There's a screen there with drivers, and I'll show you that in a moment. But here, you know, you set it up. You have different allocation types, you know, like fixed amount, some kind of basis factor, some kind of percent of the data area, etc. And then you set it up so that then the target, you're going to a different version. You set up a reference target dimension. So notice the reference dimension source and the reference target dimension. We're taking it from G&A, and then we're putting it into marketing. All right, and then so all of that gets done here. So if I go back, and then I go back again, and then I go back again. Notice with driver activation, you can set all kinds of different drivers. You either use accounts, you can use different measures that already exist in the system, and then you can set up manual drivers. You're unlimited. You can set up as many as you need or want, okay? So the whole thing is like here we have square footage. You could set up whatever. You could have a plethora of them. Whatever is necessary for you to do your allocations, you can come up with any driver you need. There is no one's going to restrict you, okay? So if we go to data flow, then after we go do all this, we have reporting, okay? So it's called data flow analysis. And so if I switch this up, you'll see that we have our pre-allocation, which discharged, right, which was sent from one entity to another, and then what was charged, which then got sent to the specific entities, and in a post-allocation, what the amount is after. So if we take a look at this, you can drill down at an organizational level. You can see, you know, we go to G&A, and you can see all the different departments and how everything moved, okay? So and there's also a waterfall report, which is similar to this, but it shows it, since we only have one level here that I'm going to show you. But if you have multiple levels, it'll show how everything moved on each level, showing the waterfall progress of the allocation, okay? All right, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I hope I haven't run over too much. But does anybody else, any other questions, guys? I mean, is this interesting? Are you interested in seeing more?
Definitely interested in that work plan thing that you had mentioned earlier in the projections module.
Okay. Cool. All right. And one thing I wanted to show you, the one last thing, was just some reporting very quickly. And I know we're getting a little tight here, but if I go back to my home page, again, I have a reporting dashboard. So let's tie it all together, all right? We have like profit and loss statements. So if I have a profit and loss monthly report, right?
with graphics across the top to show you, you know, you can set up whatever kind of KPIs you like across the top. And then what you have is your income statement. So there's your income statement. If we go back to the reporting portal, and I go to balance sheet, here's your monthly balance sheet. Again, we have variance reports of each of them, but actually this is on a monthly basis. So we can see what our balance sheet is for the impact of everything we've done with our budget. We can see what the impact is on our you know, income streams. We can see what the impact is on our balance sheet, what our balance sheet looks like, and then finally, what we can do is we can now take a look at our cash flow. So if we look at our liquidity and cash flow, notice on this report, we have all of our key metrics on the top of the report on a 30, 60, 90, 180, 365-day period. So throughout that year, we can see where our cash flow sits as key cash flow KPIs. And then down at the bottom, we can see what our total cash and equivalents balances look like throughout the year. So we're looking at, if we have a feeling that we may have liquidity problems as the year goes along, we are able to model this and then see the impact of all the changes that we've made. First, we have our, you know, we can see what happens as far as like our income and what that's like, what our balance sheet looks like, and then what our cash flow looks like. So it's all tied together. It's an end-to-end solution. And don't forget, we're getting our actuals from CloudSuite Financials. We're pulling it in through that mapping that we made, and then we're putting together everything so that then we see our cash flow at the very, you know, as this is a whole process that brings us to this point, so we know and we can feel comfortable as to what our cash flow situation is, or we need to take action. This is actionable information. Same thing here is we have a 5-year look at what our cash flow looked like. So year over year, right? We have you can see again our spark lines in this column here, this 5-year trend column. So this shows us graphically what each specific activity that drives our cash flow, what it looks like, and then we can see over that 5-year period what our free cash flow looks like, what our free cash flow growth is, and what our free cash flow yield is. Okay. So does that, you know, I think this is powerful because you can see the impact of it from end to end to end. It's one comprehensive solution, and you tie it all together, and it can help you manage this in a very effective, efficient manner.
So this is a 5-year trend in the past, but you can do this 5 years forward as well?
Oh, yes, most certainly, yes. This is historical, but if you wanted to model it 5 years out, you could do that as well. Because remember, in our other report that we looked at, right, we had we had the 30, 60, 90, 180, 365-day year. You could do the same report over a 5-year period.
Okay.
You know, it's again, because of dimensionality and the way that you can slice and dice everything, you could set this up so you can look at it like this, or you could look at it like a 5-year period.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay. Any other questions?
No.
Okay.